And now I'm going to go ahead and let three very important people introduce themselves. And I'm going to start with Vanessa Cooksey, who is the president and CEO of the Regional Arts Commission.
Hello, everyone. Thank you all so much for being here and trying to figure out how to get my video on, but I won't be staying long. Just wanted to say thank you all so much for participating in this workshop. This has been several years in the making. And the reason why I say that is because we've got a new grant making system that we are excited for you to experience and give us your feedback. And of course, as you all are acutely aware, we've had our share of financial struggles with the pandemic. And so to be able to offer a new round of grants this year is a Herculean feat. And I just want to say thank you to Anne and to Chloe in particular, our leaders of our grants and programs division, and to Jay for making this happen. And so please ask your questions. We want the feedback and are looking forward to seeing the great work that you will do with your programs to keep this community vibrant and thriving with creativity. So thank you all so much.
Thank you so much, Vanessa. And I'm going to go ahead now and throw it over to Chloe Smith, who many of you might know, but if you don't, she's going to say hello.
Hello, everyone. I'm Chloe Smith. I'm Grants and Programs Manager at the Regional Arts Commission, and I'm so glad that you're all here today to learn a little bit more about our program support application and just what that looks like for you guys. And I'll turn it over to Anne to introduce herself and we can get going.
Hey, good morning, everybody. I'm Ann Haubrick. I am the Grants and Programs Senior Manager with RAC, and Chloe and I have been working very hard to make this grants round run as smoothly as possible. We're here for your questions, and we hope this presentation helps you as you develop your applications and get some RAC support. All right, ready to get started? So you know why you're here. Next slide, please, Jay. And I wanted to talk a little bit about RAC's priorities, and you can our mission and vision. As the leading I'm going to read all of this because it's very important that you understand where RAC is coming from when we talk about our mission and vision and our core values. So as the leading public catalyst for arts and culture in St. Louis, the Regional Arts Commission leverages the power of creativity to strengthen and enrich our community. RAC envisions a full creative life for every St. Louisian, St. Louis as a growing and captivating arts and culture destination, and RAC envisions a community rich with opportunities and resources that promote and sustain artists. Our guiding principles. We invest in the region's arts and culture through our grants, programs, and special initiatives. We believe in diversity, racial equity, accessibility, and inclusion. We build partnerships that strengthen our community. We are passionate champions that support and recognize artists. And we believe every child deserves a well-rounded education that includes the arts. Our core values embody our culture, spirit, and dedication to living our mission. They keep us grounded and help us make good decisions about everything we do. We are passionate champions for arts and culture, accountable stewards of the public trust, committed to practices that promote diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility, socially and civically engaged community catalysts, and we are servant leaders. I go through all of that because our grant-making practices all flow from our mission, vision, guiding principles, and core values. We strike a balance between our passion and interests and the needs of the community. The grants committee and grants team, that would be Chloe and me, worked to be sure our new grant cycle reflects our mission, vision, principles, and core values, which helps ensure our process runs smoothly as possible. So we hope it's going to run smoothly. In terms of program support, what is program support? So RAC's program support grant category provides project-based support to arts and culture organizations and non-arts nonprofit organizations in the production and or presentation of artistic activities. These ongoing and one-time projects broaden and deepen audience participation and increase access to the arts for visitors and residents throughout the St. Louis region. So there's a few things that are new this year since 2019. And one thing is our grants management system. We have engaged with Blackbaud, and so that is the system that we're using, and you will become very familiar with it. If you need technical assistance with that system, there's the email right there, and that is in the grants guidelines, as well as you will receive these slides afterwards, so that if you need that, you'll have it. There's also an updated program support schedule and an eligibility quiz that's part of the application process. We have finessed a 10-point rating system that we think you will find easier to use if you have been a past applicant. And this is very exciting for us and for you. We have removed the requirement for matching funds. So although, and I want to stress this, although we're not requiring matching funds for program support grantees in 2022, we do encourage diverse revenue streams for program support, but that does not have to be a one-to-one match. We have also removed the grant tier requirements. In previous years, applicants applied to a tier that totaled half the cost of their project expenses, so you don't need to do that. And this year, organizations are encouraged to apply at the funding tier that reflects the amount needed for their program, but hopefully not total project expenses. Also new this year is the updated review process. This year, the application process will take place during a 90-minute virtual meeting rather than a panel meeting. Grant reviewers will read and rate all applications within the GMS portal, the Blackbaud portal. Staff will review the ratings and determine the applications with the greatest score variance, which will be discussed during the review meeting. Reviewers will provide a second rating to those applications. All application ratings will be averaged, ranked highest to lowest, and then presented to the reviewers for a final review. Just remember that not all applications will be reviewed during the virtual meeting. All virtual meetings will be recorded and published on the RAC website so that applicants may listen to their applications review. We also have an updated appeals process. If an applicant appeals the review panel decision, a second virtual meeting will occur. At the appeals meeting, RAC staff will present the appeal as submitted by the organization to the reviewers who rated the application. The appeal meeting will not be open to applicants. Results of the appeals meeting will be shared with the applicant the week following the meeting, and we'll get into that a little bit later in this webinar. We also have an updated disbursement process and an updated reporting process. There are also new grant stages in the Blackbaud system. With the new system, RAC will follow new grant stages embedded in that system. The stages of the grant process are: number one, the request, which is your application; number two, the decision-making process, which happens when the panels review your applications and then meet; number three, grant management, when that grant is made, how the organizations handle that grant; and then analysis. That happens when the organizations and RAC staff assess how we all did and look at the data provided and make improvements to that system. In terms of program support eligibility requirements, we know that there has to be a local focus. So arts programs and projects must occur in St. Louis City and or St. Louis County. You also must be a 501c3 nonprofit organization in good standing with the state of Missouri. The grant cycle, arts and programs and projects must occur during the applicable grant cycle, and an organization may submit only one application per grant cycle. The proposed program's primary purpose must be the creation, presentation, or utilization of art. A first-time applicant to RAC is eligible to apply only at the $3,000 or $5,000 grant tier, regardless of the project budget. And the grant cycle, the program for which you are applying, must take place between July 1, 2022 and June 31, 2023. A couple of things that are not in this presentation, but I'm going to tell you about. You can stay right there, Jay, thanks. In program support, a project may consist of one or more specific events or activities. It may be part of or all of an applicant's regular season or activities. Applicants that undertake a single short-term project in a year, a 10-day jazz festival, for example, could apply for the event, or they could identify certain components, such as the presentation of a key artist and the associated activities, as their project. Also in program support, applicants may apply for any or all phases of a project from its planning through its execution. Also, projects may be new and untested or ongoing with a proven track record. Also, projects may cover a broad range of singular or multiple artistic disciplines. This information is in the grants guidelines booklet that is on our website. In terms of the categories and program support, those are arts and culture programs, cultural festivals, parades, and special events, and arts-based community development. Next slide, please. If you're going to apply with a fiscal sponsorship, if you don't have your own 501c3, we are offering grants to those fiscally sponsored organizations at the $5,000 level and $3,000 grant tier only. A fiscal sponsor must be a 501c3 tax exempt organization. They must have a strong history of arts programming or have a fiscal sponsorship based mission. There's more information about that in the grants guidelines. When you're accessing the application, because this is a new platform and a new program for us, everyone, it doesn't matter if you've registered before, everyone will need to create a new account. And we think that those instructions are pretty clear. And if you have any troubles, you can get in touch with Blackbaud at that email that was sent, that you saw at the beginning of this webinar, and that are in the grants guidelines. You'll create your new account, including your email and password, and make sure you have your tax ID ready. You will need to access it during the eligibility quiz. So your organization's tax ID, that EIN. You will then answer the questions in the eligibility quiz to access the application. And now I'll go over a brief application overview. So the application includes the following headings: the organizational information, the program information, artistic merit and professional artist information, community benefit, organizational capacity, program expense and income budgets. We're going to go into that a little bit deeper too. Demographic information. We think we've simplified the demographic information from the past few years' applications, so we hope you're happy with that. And then you'll also be uploading supporting documentation, which includes work samples and critical reviews. With the application review and rating, we are looking at the following criteria: artistic merit and quality of programs, community benefit, and your organizational capacity. We have also simplified the 10-point rating scale, so we hope this is helpful too. We've ripped a page from the NEA, the National Endowment for the Arts rating scale, so we think this is pretty easy. So it starts at 10 is outstanding, on down to 1, which is not competitive. Ratings determine your funding. Applicants who receive a rating of 10 are considered model. They meet all review criteria in an exemplary fashion, and a rating of 10 is rare. Applicants who receive a rating of 6 are considered good, but some development is needed. Applicants who receive a rating of 4 are considered in need of significant improvement in multiple areas, and depending upon the availability of funds, may not receive funding. Organizations who receive a rating of 3 or below do not meet RAC criteria and will not be recommended for funding. Most applications will receive an average that is not a whole number. For example, if an application is reviewed by 7 grant readers and receive a rating, a whole number rating, the application's average would be 6.7 if you added up all those numbers. This means the application is eligible to receive 60% of the funding applied for. The percent of eligibility is determined by the whole number and is not rounded up or down. The program support grant tiers are $3,000, $5,000, $10,000, and $15,000. First-time applicants can apply at the $3,000 and $5,000 levels, and they can apply with a fiscal sponsor. First-time applicants cannot apply at the $10,000 and $15,000 tier, and they cannot apply with the fiscal sponsor. You'll want to study these tables in the application guidelines. These are the grant tier tables and the matching fund tables. But we're not requiring matching funds this year, so I should not have said that. But you'll want to study those when you're looking at the guidelines. So, and we think it's pretty clear. And just let us know if you have any questions about that. The review process, you'll want to be aware of the review process. And as always, the grant reviewers play a central role in RAC's annual grant making process. Reviewers commit to going through an orientation, through doing independent review, to attending the virtual review meeting, to attending the appeals process if they need to, and an evaluation process as well. So, you'll be able to review all of these, and I think it's pretty straightforward. And just let me just remind you, at the virtual review meeting, I just want to stress this, that the reviewers will attend a virtual review meeting with other panelists to discuss and rate applications with the greatest variance in scoring from the first round of reviews. Again, not every application will be reviewed during the meeting. The virtual review meeting, before this meeting, RAC staff will average all panelists' independent ratings for the organization average rating. Only those, again, only those with the greatest variance in the panelist scores will be reviewed at this meeting. At the meeting, applications with a large scoring variance will be reviewed. There will be the opportunity to move an organization up or down on the rating scale. Once adjustments, if any, are made, the organizations will be sent the comments made during the meeting and the final rating. So even if your application is not discussed at the meeting, you will receive those comments. Once organizations have their ratings, they have the opportunity to appeal, and the review meeting will be recorded and published to the website. The appeals process, and we're hoping that there aren't any appeals. Applicants must have solid grounds for an appeal. Dissatisfaction with a rating or denial of an award is not sufficient grounds for an appeal. Solid grounds for an appeal are based on a misstatement of fact made during the review meeting and reviewer comments that can be evidenced by written information found in the application, or if the applicant can demonstrate that the review of the application was based on criteria or application requirements other than those appearing in the RAC guidelines. New information not originally included in the application cannot be offered as evidence of the misstatement. If an applicant has grounds for an appeal form will be filed with RAC staff. Staff will then review and approve all requests for appeals before convening reviewers for reconsideration. Appeals will not move forward without staff approval. However, staff approval does not guarantee that the appeal will be approved by the review panel or that the original rating will change. Should RAC approve the filed appeal in a second virtual meeting, RAC staff will submit the appeal to the reviewers. The appeal calls will not be open to applicants. The panelists may vote in favor of approving an increase to the final rating. The results of the appeals call will be shared with the applicant the following week. And at this time, we've got a short video embedded in our webinar that is a training video about our financials.
My name is Amy Altotes, and I have the pleasure of serving on the board of Volunteer Lawyers and Accountants for the Arts. And I'm excited to be with you all to share some tips and recommendations as you all are completing the financial elements of your upcoming RAC grant application. We're going to really focus on two main aspects, and these are really the two elements that you are going to need to include with your application. We're going to start by talking about your program budget before we also then move over and talk about the prior year financial statements that you are going to include within that application. But again, we're going to kick it off with your program grant budget. And really this, and we're going to pull up the template in just a minute, but really to kind of set expectations and think about how we're going into that process. This is really the last element of your grant application. You have put a lot of hard work into developing your proposed program, the plan for that program, and really the budget is that last element to really show to RAC as well as other funders what your financial plan is for supporting that proposed program. We want this budget to build confidence in your funders that you have a solid plan that you can execute to fulfill and execute this great program. So we're going to pull up that template. So we're looking at this together. But really what we're looking at here is twofold. A budget similar to your statement of activities for your financial statements is really looking at a snapshot of the cost of executing this proposed program relative to the funding that has been committed to finance and really, again, support that program execution. So again, there's really two elements. The top section of this template is, again, really focusing on those expenses. So what money needs to go out the door to execute that program relative to the funding that will support that, both what you already have committed for that program, as well as what's pending or what in the future additional that will come in from that element. And again, the key when we're looking at this is to make sure that we are reflecting the whole programmatic budget. So the cost of executing the whole program. We know that you are asking RAC to support a piece of that funding, but we want to make sure that this is a really complete picture of the necessary resources for that program. And as we go in and think about putting that budget together, I'm going to try to, it's not normal in the accounting space, going to put a little creativity behind it. And I want you to think about making your budget RAD. So we're going to use this acronym RAD to really help us focus as we go through this. So we're going to start with that R. And my first tip for you all is we really want to make sure this budget is realistic. This is going to be the benchmark that RAC, as well as other donors that are supporting this particular program, are going to measure your success towards. So we want to make sure that this is really going to be something that you all believe is realistic and achievable. I'm an eternal optimist, so it's really hard to kind of pull back from that sometimes, but we don't want to be too optimistic. We want to be realistic. Remember that R. We also don't want to be too aggressive, particularly when we get down to this revenue section and we're talking about, again, planned contributions, other support that's going to come in to support this program. Again, we don't want to just, oh, we need this much, kind of plug that number in there to get a balanced budget. We really want to make sure we're being thoughtful from this. We also want to think about under that guise and under that lens of being realistic, that we're thinking about the various scenarios that could happen. Again, we want to think in that worst case scenario, what does our budget look like? In our best case scenario, what does our budget look like? Again, hopefully we're not in either one of those, but maybe the realistic answer is somewhere in the middle. So again, don't forget that R, realistic. If we move down our acronym to the A in RAD, that's really alignment. We want to make sure, as I open with, this budget is the financial reflection on that grant application that you all just submitted. So we want to make sure that this is consistent with the narrative, with our program goals, with our program timeline, with our expectations. We really want to make sure that this is, again, just that final extension of that application that you are submitting. So again, we really want to look for that alignment and that consistency. And then my last tip in our acronym, realistic, aligned, and the D is going to stand for detailed. What you're seeing here is a pretty summarized Excel spreadsheet that you're going to complete. But to be successful and to have an actual useful tool for the future, there needs to be a lot more information behind this. So I would recommend that you create a separate Excel spreadsheet where you can really, again, as we're thinking about being realistic in alignment with our program purpose and objectives, can create a detailed inventory of, again, what money that we think is going to go out the door related to this program, as well as what are some of those specific funding that we've already achieved or that we have in process for that program. We want that detailed listing. So what I would do if I was in your shoes is I would really go line by line and really, again, think about past experience that you've had, particularly with this program, your understanding of what it takes, asking other people involved in the program for their input, and really write down specifics. Where do we think the money is going to go out the door? In what amount? In what timing? I kind of want a timeline to forecast this out. It's easy to think about those direct costs, those things that we know I'm going to need this particular program supply, I'm going to need to hire this particular person. Those are a little easier when you're doing that initial brainstorming of really the total cost of executing the program. But I would remind you not to forget some of those, what I'm going to call indirect or maybe overhead type costs that also are necessary to execute that program, whether it's particular staff or team members at your organization that are going to be involved. If there's certain utilities, space, general supplies, things that they're going to utilize, don't forget to include those as well. But again, you're going to have this detailed planning this all out. So later when a funder asks you, how did you spend your money relative to that budget, you'll know and remember, again, where those costs and those revenue dollars are coming from. So again, be detailed, look big picture, make sure we're capturing both our direct and kind of our indirect programmatic cost. Make sure you get the input of your entire team. So we're relying on their expertise, their experience, their knowledge of the plan program to make sure this is, again, as realistic and complete as possible. And use then that detailed spreadsheet that you're creating to then summarize that and pull in those totals into this budget template. And once you carry over those totals, really the final check to know if we're in a good shape going forward is going to be, we're going to know the total costs that we have estimated for the whole program. We're going to layer in that funding that we either have committed or in process. And really the goal is that we want to, again, not be too aggressive, but make sure that we have a good plan. If it's going to cost this much money to execute the program, that we have enough funding and that really it's a break even, that revenue equals that expense. And that's really the sign that we kind of the final double check stamp of approval on that budget is to know that we have that bottom line amount that we expect to utilize matches the amount that we are bringing in, again, on a global basis for that program to ensure success. Well, and as we are wrapping up our RAD budget and before we pivot over to our financial statements, one point of clarification that I want to layer in for the non-accountants in the room is when you're looking at your budget template, and again, hopefully a lot of this looks very familiar to what you've seen in the past, some of these expense lines, some of these revenue lines, the area that might look a little unusual is our 2-column headings. So just want to add a little bit of clarity behind that as you go in. So from both a budget perspective, we're going to look for what of our expenditures, so what money that's going to go out the door to support our program purpose is going to be a cash outlay to the organization, and potentially is any of that cost going to be donated to the organization. That is this concept of an in-kind, is really when we're going to utilize non-cash items that are gifted or donated to our organization. So that could be someone donating their time. So perhaps they are donating artistic services or technical production services, or maybe they're actually donating equipment that we're going to use for our particular production, our program, or travel cost, or professional services. Don't forget to capture those. So again, talk to that potential donor, get a valuation of what that might cost if we actually had to pay for it, and make sure that we're reflecting that element as part of our overall budget in this column here. The good news with an in-kind expense is that you're always going to have a corresponding in-kind revenue. So whatever this total adds up right here, we want to make sure that matches in our revenue section below by putting that same dollar amount on this line here. That's going to be our in-kinds. So really that's going to be the other side of that, to make sure that we have that balanced budget, is we're going to have our expenses captured above, and then we're going to have our corresponding revenues right here. So just wanted to point that out in case that's a little confusing. That's something that you have seen in the past, but hopefully that allows you that knowledge again to turn back and produce that RAD budget. So like I mentioned, really there's going to be two financial elements within your grant application. We're going to have that budget for our program that we just talked about, and we're also going to prepare and present financial statements for your organization on an overall organizational basis for the last year, based on your organization's last fiscal year. So if you're a December year end, that would be December 31st, 2021, or if you're a fiscal year end like a June, that would also be your June 30th, 2021. And really within this financial statements, there's going to be two elements. And I am showing on my screen an example resource. Again, every organization's financials are going to look different. They're going to reflect your particular organization's activity and balances and purpose. But on a high level, you're really going to have two statements. You're going to have this first statement here, which is called a statement of financial position, or sometimes it's referred to as a balance sheet for a nonprofit. So that's statement one, and we're going to talk about both of these in great detail, but we're going to start with statement one, which is your statement of financial position. And you're also going to have a statement of activities, which is sometimes referred to as an income statement for a nonprofit. So those are going to be the two elements that you're going to need to prepare for your organization for your last year. So how do we set you up for success there? And how can we make this reflect your organization in the best light possible? I'm going to cheat a little bit and start with the easier and work our way to the more difficult by starting with this statement of activities, because this is a little easier to conceptually understand. This really mirrors that budget we just spent time talking about. Because your statement of activities, think about it as your organization's factory. This is the money coming in, this revenue section at the top, and then the money going out, the expense section down at the bottom, to really get to, at the end of the day, do we have a net surplus from our operations this year, or do we potentially have a deficit? So really, when I'm preparing this financial statement, I really want to go back and look over that whole year. And again, hopefully this is something that your organization has been tracking throughout the year. Hopefully we're comparing this to an internal budget that we're benchmarking towards. But we really want to look at, again, this concept of revenue. So really, where is all the money coming into our factory? And again, then delineating, how is that money going out? And really, again, there's no like rhyme or reason on what level of detail that you need to reflect within this statement. I try to think about my particular organization, what my main activities are, where my main costs are centralized in, and choose the appropriate level of detail. Really think about, how do I tell my story to my potential funders? If they give me money, here's where it's all coming from. And again, here's the main categories that I'm spending those resources on. So I think it's usually easier, again, to start with preparing that factory, preparing that statement of activities to really get that mindset of really what has happened during the last year. Again, money coming in, money going out, subtract revenue less expenses equals that change in net assets. And I think having that understanding helps you pivot then. If we go back a slide and we look at our statement of financial position or this balance sheet, we're looking at, now we know all the money that came in and out to the organization. Let's see what's remaining at this point in time. So looking at that end of your fiscal year, what resources do I have available for the organization to use in the future? That's really what's captured in this asset section, compared to what obligations, what things do I know that I am locked into that I'm going to have to pay out in the next year, 2 years, 3 years. What are those liabilities that balance those resources I have? And then really over time, what are my net assets? Kind of the remainder. Assets equal your liabilities plus that net asset balance. You want this to be in balance. So how do you actually put this statement together? Again, hopefully this is something that you are tracking throughout the year, but really if you think about those themes, it's really looking back. Again, we're snapshotting at one point in time, what are we holding and what do we owe? So I recommend looking from your asset perspective, look about any investment, cash, other accounts that you may be holding. What is the balance in those accounts as of the date that we are looking at? Do we have any firm commitments from any of our funders that we have already included within our revenue on our statement of activities? We want to put the receivable side of that. So if we don't have the cash yet, but we expect it in the future and we've already included it within our revenue, we want to capture that in one of these pledges receivable, grants receivable line items. We also want to look if your organization has made any investments in your infrastructure. So are you holding any property, any equipment, anything that you're using now that, again, hopefully will still have some future value? Reflect those assets in your total as well. So again, low-hanging fruit of things to make sure we capture: cash, investments, any, again, firm donor or grant commitments, as well as any investment in our infrastructure, any property or equipment that your organization owns. And then think about it from the reverse side. When we think about our liabilities, we want to reflect, again, what commitments do we have outstanding that we want to make sure that the users of the financial statements know that some of these resources that we have available are going to need to go to pay those obligations. So that could be any bills you have any outstanding, any invoices, any credit card bills. If you have, your organization has any payroll liabilities, do we owe anybody any salaries from the previous year? Do we owe any payroll taxes? Do we owe any employee benefits? We want to get those reflected here. Does the organization have any debt that's still outstanding that we need to pay off in the future? That could be a term note that has scheduled maturities. It could be a line of credit we borrowed on. It could even be if you still have a Paycheck Protection Program loan that's outstanding that hasn't been forgiven yet. We really want to make sure we're thinking about and accumulating all of those potential obligations, and again, reflecting as a liability within your financials. So future resources captured in assets, future obligations that we're going to have to pay money out, liabilities, and again, kind of the remainder is then your net assets. And that really, again, assets equals that liabilities plus net assets. So we want to make sure that's again, your final check of approval on this report is making sure that those two are in balance. So now that we've gone through both your program budget as well as the financial statements that you're going to include for your organization for the last year, I just want to leave with you with a few overall tips as you are embarking on this fun financial journey. The first is really just to make sure you're devoting and investing the time. I understand that I am speaking to a lot of non-accountants, and a lot of the words I am using are probably foreign and gibberish to you. So spend the time to really understand, hopefully rewatch this video a few times to make sure you understand what you're presenting, what picture you're sharing for your organization, that you're spending the time necessary to do that to the best and highest of your abilities. This is really your opportunity to give potential funders confidence in your organization, in its financial position. They're going to look at that and then use that to make assessments of whether you are a good investment for their funding to, again, achieve these amazing programmatic initiatives that you would like to embark on. We are all not accountants, so while you're investing that time, please seek help and guidance. This is complex. Look at your board, look at your volunteers, see if any of them have a financial or an accounting background. And I know that they would be more than happy to share those resources, those expertise with your organization to, again, help with this endeavor. Or please, I'll put a plug in, please feel free to reach out to Volunteer Lawyers and Accountants for the Arts. We love to help organizations in all manners accounting, so we're happy to be of assistance to help you put this stuff together, or again, set you up for future success in this area. Because really, this is just the baseline. So I would challenge you all to think about the future. And as your organization continues to grow and expand, again, spend the time to make sure you have a great financial infrastructure in place. Everything that we've been showing you thus far can be done in an Excel spreadsheet, but perhaps your organization's at the stage that you can continue to invest. And there's some great, relatively easy to use accounting softwares like QuickBooks Online that organizations can receive fairly economically through certain vendors like TechSoup. That might be a great investment in your future. Make this an aspiration for your organization. If you build it, they will come. So if you build that financial infrastructure, you're able to produce great financial reports, able to give, again, funders confidence in your organization, where you're at and where you want to go in the future, I really think that that can lead to very exciting things. So excited as you continue this journey, and good luck as you put these documents together.
Great. Any other questions?
We did that good of a job, huh? From Carlos, does the process, is it similar for independent artists, which I guess would speak to what we're doing next week?
Yeah, it is fairly similar. It's not as all encompassing as a program support grant. So for the individual artist, I mean, you've just got your own budget to take care of. There's not a financial statement that you have to submit, but you do have to submit a budget, and it's very simple. Anything I'm missing, Chloe?
I think just demographic information, like collecting information, is always a little bit harder for programs because it's larger, it encompasses more people. But yeah, I think you nailed it. It's a very similar process.
Great. And thanks for all the positive feedbacks from everybody.
Marina asks, if you're an individual artist running a program, can you apply for both?
Well, that would depend. If you are applying for no, I don't think you would be able to. Chloe, how would you answer that?
Yeah, so if you're working for a 501c3 and you're also an individual artist, so if you would be happening to apply for the program for the organization that you work under, you could also apply as an individual artist. But if you are an individual artist and you're doing a public, presentation, or you're going to have a program where you're presenting to the public, that is an artist support grant. So you would only be able to apply for an artist support grant. And then once you're in the artist support grant, something that we did a little different this year is that there's 2 applications. So there's one for artists who just need, it's personal need, so it's individual to them. And then there's an application for artists that is a public facing project. So it looks a little different this year. But yes, so I mean, it would depend on your situation. And if you want to email either of us, you can, to get a little bit more information.
I have a question from Eric that says, should financial statements be for the last normal season as opposed to those during COVID?
Your last completed fiscal year.
So it will be during COVID. We are instructing reviewers to take that into account so that they won't judge so harshly, because we know everyone has been through a tough time with the pandemic.
Becky wants to know, can you please talk a little bit about how to best showcase a theater season with different sub-programs as a program application?
Sure, there are limited characters like any application, and hopefully you'll be able to be succinct enough to capture your whole season in that application. Yeah, so it'll just, I mean, I don't know how else to answer that. You'll just have to be succinct, let us know exactly what you're asking for, and then I think that the budget will also speak to that.
Yeah, and I think definitely trying to best utilize the work samples. So I feel always for theater shows, and when it's an entire season, if you can upload like a pamphlet that shows every show that you've had, then you can kind of speak to what each one of those was like in the work sample description.
Sherry says there's not a place to list artists, dates, and venues. So how will you know what anyone is doing? Would that be something that you guys would want extra documentation on, I'm guessing?
Chloe, do you want to speak to that?
Yes, so to make it easier on our program support grantees, we tried to reduce the amount of information that we were asking for. I do believe that in the program description, that is where we're going to be looking for the most information. I do believe that you're limited to 500 words there, and correct me if I'm wrong.
I think that's right.
So I would just really try to be as descriptive as possible, but also concise in describing what your program exactly entails in that program description. And just know that, we're trying to collect less information because the timeline is shorter, and we also want to make it easier on you, our applicants, and of course our reviewers, who will probably be reviewing quite a few grants this cycle.
Again, you have emails up on the screen right now for both Chloe and Ann. They are there to answer any of your questions if you think about something a little bit later. And we'll continue to update our website at racstl.org/grants. So thank you so much for everyone that came today. Obviously, thank you to Ann and Chloe for being a wealth of knowledge about our grant system. And we look forward to having everyone submit their program applications. We are beyond thrilled. This is the first time in 2 years we've been able to do this, and we really, truly are ecstatic to be able to give out grants again. So thank you again, everyone, and we look forward to your applications. Have a wonderful rest of your day.